Listen closely now, do not let your eyes drift away, for there is a voice pressed into a single, urgent moment that must reach you before it leaves the world forever. The air around this message is heavy with farewell and confession, with the weight of things unsaid pushing each syllable forward like a tide toward shore. Hold this space as if it were a fragile glass holding a single candle, because what follows is a last light meant only for you. There is no theatrics in the way this truth arrives, only the slow, steady collapse of all the small pretenses that have kept the deeper things hidden. The person who needs to speak has been collecting courage like coins, small treasures kept in the pocket of a story they never finished telling. They have rehearsed the confession in private rooms, in baths of silence, in the pauses between breaths, and now the last coin must be spent. They will not choose grand metaphors when they say your name, they will choose the blunt, honest words that have always been hard to say out loud. Expect simple sentences loaded like freight, sentences that unload years of tenderness, regret, apology, and the thin, bright ache of love. When those sentences arrive, let them land without armor, because armor will only block the small mercy they carry. This is not a message about distant things or abstract ideas, but about the raw practicalities that will shape what comes next. There are hands to be held, papers to be found, places that must be opened and doors that must be unlocked so that dignity can be preserved in the hours that follow. The speaker thinks in lists now, in the quiet clarity that comes when time shortens to a single lane and every lane matters. Listen for the names of people who must be told, for the addresses and the small details that will make official things movable and humane. There will be an insistence on small rituals that mean everything to a heart that wants to leave no loose threads behind. These rituals will be less about ceremony and more about making sure that when the world closes its brief eyes, it does so with the care of completion. There will be an insistence on forgiveness, not because the faults were minor but because the person knows that holding anger is like carrying a burning coal into the next room. They will ask you to forgive in their absence as an act of mercy that saves both souls from future shackles. This forgiveness will be offered not as an excuse for wrongs but as a final, deliberate renunciation of bitterness. Expect confessions that are sharp and startling, confessions that rearrange how you remember simple days and ordinary gestures. The person will point at moments you thought were small and explain how, for them, those moments were everything. When those explanations come, do not shrink from them, for they are the map that makes sense of a life that might otherwise be a scatter of fragments. There will be practical instructions spoken in an even voice, instructions about keys hidden in places you would never think to look, about a small safe behind a loose board, about a notebook where they stowed passwords and hopes. The tone will be matter of fact, because in the end the person wants only to ensure that the future can unfold with as few obstacles as possible. Write these things down as they come, and treat those words like a fragile will. They will ask you to look after someone who has always been easy to overlook, a cousin or a neighbor or a friend who always seemed like background until suddenly they do not have anyone left. This request will come wrapped in the speaker's observation that attention is a resource more precious than money, and that it keeps the small engines of life running. Promise it, and mean it, because promises made in last light have a way of binding the future. You will be told about secret hurts that were carried for decades, hurts folded into quiet expressions and polite behavior, hurts that shaped the way the person loved and guarded themselves. Those hurts will not be used as excuses but as explanations, as gifts of understanding for why certain patterns were repeated. Receive that understanding with gentleness, for it is given as a final apprenticeship in compassion. There will be moments when the person tries to be brave and misses, revealing vulnerability in the rawest terms. Do not pretend it is tidy, do not tidy it for them, because messiness is part of their truth and must be honored. Let the clumsy sentences fall where they will and listen to the tremor in them as if it were itself a language. They will tell you which belongings matter and which can go to the wind, and their priorities may surprise you by being tender and modest. An old scarf, a chipped cup, a dog-eared book may be named with such affection that these things become relics, vessels of a life that loved in small increments. Respect these choices because they are the final, intimate declarations of what shaped the person's inner landscape. Expect to hear directions to places that felt like anchors, a bench by the river, a certain narrow lane, a café table where they felt seen. They will ask that these places be visited, that someone read aloud the lines they loved, or that their favorite song be played one last time in the light of a morning. These requests are not flights of sentimentality but assemblages of meaning, careful beacons set in the geography of memory. There will be confessions of fear, plain and unadorned. The person will admit what kept them awake, the precise image that made the throat tighten, the small dread that never quite loosened. When they speak of fear, accept it as truth and let your hand be the answer, firm and steady, without speeches. They will tell truths about the ways they failed, about the opportunities missed and the apologies never quite formed. Expect the bluntness of accountability, because in a final hour vanity surrenders and what remains is the sober tally of deeds and neglects. This confession is not a request for absolution that must cost you anything but attention and witness. There will be an urgent plea to tend to health and to memories with equal seriousness, with a note that bodies and stories both need careful stewardship. The speaker may ask you to keep up medical appointments for someone else, to make sure prescriptions are refilled, to be present in the small ways that count for continuity. There is a wisdom in that urgency, because the person understands that living things need continuity provided by other living hands. The voice will name the things that have always brought them comfort and ask that those comforts continue where possible, a playlist of songs, a particular tea, an old sweater gently washed and kept near. This wish is not indulgent but practical, aimed at making transition smoother for those left behind. Honor it as though you were arranging a small, necessary harbor. They will give instructions about financial matters spoken plainly, the account names, the document locations, the passwords stored in a methodical place, all laid out in a voice that has learned to be precise when time shrinks. This practical clarity is a kindness meant to prevent confusion and needless delay when intelligence and faith must take the lower road of paperwork. Follow these instructions precisely, and do not let speculation override the facts they left for you. You will be asked to find a particular letter or journal page that contains a message meant only for certain hearts, a thing tucked inside a drawer or behind a photograph. The act of locating that page will be a ritual of attention, and when it is found the words contained there will alter the shape of memory. Treat the search as sacred work, like cataloging small bones of grace. There will be an insistence on candid conversations with people who remained at the outskirts of the relationship, conversations that will stitch raw edges back together before the silence falls. The person will want bridges rebuilt even if only in fragments, because they understand that leaving bridges standing helps those who cross them later. Make those calls, hold those meetings, and speak the truth with a careful softness. You will be urged to let go of things that have been kept out of shame, to name them plainly and then permit them to pass. The person asking this will have found in their shortening horizon the economy of release, the lightness that comes when possessions and grudges are given up with intention. Embrace that lightness for yourself once the immediate tasks are done. Expect confessions about love that have been complicated, imperfect, and stubbornly human. The person may show the maps of old attachments, the ways they held back and the reasons for those walls. Receive these confessions as an offering, not as a weapon, because they are carved with love and a wish for whoever remains to love better. There will be a message about lineage, about what family really means beyond bloodlines and social contracts, about the people who have been true in small, faithful ways. The person will name these people and ask that their loyalty be returned in kind through visits, calls, and small acts of care. Carry this duty as you would a small, luminous object that keeps the night from being absolute. They will speak about humor and small joy with a fierce tenderness, recalling the jokes that only a few shared, the secret laughter that warmed late nights. These memories will arrive like sudden sunlight through a window, unexpected and precious, and the person will ask that they be told again at moments of grieving to break the edges of sorrow. Keep these stories alive, for laughter is a thread that untangles grief. There will be a clear, repeating plea to listen to the quiet, to attend to the moments that used to be dismissed, to breathe again into the soft, ordinary rituals that shape daily life. This request will be framed as an activism of attention, as if paying attention were itself a form of resistance against the erosion of care. Commit to it, and let your days be measured by the small acts you can do repeatedly. Expect a list of names and small details that sound banal until you realize they are lifelines, names of neighbors, the baker with the key to the shed, a friend who keeps spare blankets. These names will form the scaffolding that supports ordinary lives, and the person will be insistent that these connections be kept intact. Do not dismiss their importance as trivial, because in the absence of a single caring hand, many small systems will fail. They will give you permission to feel whatever you feel, to be angry, bewildered, relieved, or utterly quiet, and they will ask that you not perform grief as if it were a script. This permission is a rare and radical kindness, because many people feel obligated to show standardized sorrow. Take that permission as a gift and grant it to others. There will be an entreaty to document stories for the younger ones, stories of ordinary courage and the ways the person kept going through small, stubborn acts. The instruction will be to speak plainly to children and to pass along the stories without polishing them into myth, because truth often holds more strength than legend. Those stories will become anchors for a future that needs roots. Expect a request to reconcile, not in grand gestures but in honest acknowledgments, to sit with people and speak the things that have been left half said. The person will be precise about who needs that seating, and their instructions will be tender and exact. Keep those appointments, and speak with honesty and humility. They will direct you to a playlist, a book, a lamp, a chair, and perhaps to a small stone kept in the pocket for luck, and will ask that these objects be preserved for those who come after. These objects are vessels of identity and continuity, and preserving them is a form of keeping a life accessible to memory. Treat them with the care of curators. There may be a last request about the manner of remembrance, not about ostentation but about truth, asking for a gathering that allows for frank speech, for music that was actually loved, and for food that sustained them in ordinary times. They will push against the idea of a spectacle and toward the idea of a circle where people are allowed to be themselves. Plan that gathering with humility and fidelity. They will insist that petty disputes be set aside for as long as possible, not erased but deferred, because the person knows that at the edge of departure petty fights make brittle grief heavier than it need be. This request will feel like a final mediation, spoken calmly as if arranging furniture to make room for the practical and the profound. Accept this mediation, and let it alter the course of grief. You will be told about dreams they had for the future, small projects that never found time, and the ways they imagined continuing to give even after their passing. These plans will not be grandiose plans for fame but modest continuations of generosity and care, and they will ask that you help carry these seeds forward. Plant them gently and water them with consistent attention. There will be a plea to remember that people change and that judgment does not bind the living or the dead, and that compassion is a better inheritance than condemnation. The speaker will, with a clarity that comes from seeing the end, urge that empathy be the currency passed forward. Accept this urging as a moral instruction carved into the time you now hold. Expect an insistence on keeping records tidy, on making sure that legal documents are accessible, wills are filed, and wishes are recorded plainly, because clarity in paperwork is mercy in practice. They will detail the steps with a steady voice, knowing how easily the absence of clarity can make simple things into crises. Follow those steps as though you were translating a language that preserves dignity. There will be a final list of personal confidences, secrets entrusted to you that they cannot take with them, small rooms of inner life open just enough for you to see the furniture. These confidences will be heavy and human, and the person will ask that you guard them, not use them as leverage but keep them as sacred keepings. Hold them with reverence, and let them be a part of your tenderness. They will tell you that death is not an enemy to be feared mindlessly but a teacher whose lessons are often harsh and necessary, and they will ask that you meet it with honesty and practical kindness. This will not be a statement of theology but of lived experience, of someone who knows the contours of leaving. Let their practical courage inform your steps. There may be an insistence that certain relationships be mended through specific acts of service, such as taking a sibling to a clinic, fixing a leaking roof, or delivering a batch of food to an elderly neighbor. These acts are small and immediate and yet utterly transformative because they convert grief into something that keeps life intact. Do them without spectacle and with steady hands. You will be asked to keep a vigil in whatever form suits you, to mark the passing with presence more than program, to let silence be permitted and not always filled with commentary. This invitation is a request to be present without performing, to keep the space between people open and hospitable. Attend to it as if you were stewarding a delicate instrument. They will leave you with a request to keep stories factual, to record not only the bright highlights but the messy, ordinary truths that give a life its real texture. This archival impulse will be practical and tender, meant to prevent myth from crowding out reality. Preserve both the triumphs and the small failures with equal care. There will be a final, whispered affirmation that love matters more than being right, spoken in a voice that has learned to value tenderness over triumph. This will be their last insistence, repeated like a soft benediction, urgent and simple. Carry it forward as a liturgy for daily life. When the voice finally quiets, you will be left with tasks and with the rawness of loss, but also with the clarity of a life carefully arranged for departure. The instructions they give are tools for making the immediate future bearable and humane, the small measures that keep dignity in place. Use those tools, and let the practical acts be your first prayers. Remember that the most meaningful things they asked for are not grand monuments but small continuities of care, practices that weave their presence into ordinary days. These are the things that will keep memory alive without turning it into a shrine. Tend them with persistence. Finally, when you stand in the quiet after the last word, hold what they told you close and act on it steadily, because action translates grief into care. The life that is ending asked for one last labor of love, a list of chores and promises meant to make the days left and the days after softer for those who remain. Fulfill those labors as an expression of the deep respect owed to a life that loved in ways both loud and quiet. This message is a charge and a blessing folded into a last set of instructions, and when you follow it you will be doing the most human thing possible in the face of loss. Keep the notes, keep the promises, keep the laughter and the lists of names, and let the ordinary acts you perform be the way you honor what was given to you in that urgent, final light.